Hey everyone. So on our first video that I ever recorded, I told you a little bit about my PCOS story, um, which is pretty lengthy, but what I wanted to bring up today was a little bit about being a thin sister, as it's so eloquently put on some boards. So basically what that means is it's somebody with PCOS that doesn't necessarily have a weight issue. And we don't fit the stereotypical view of PCOS, so it makes it really difficult to work with us because, in most cases, when a woman has PCOS and she's overweight, taking care of the weight issue relieves a lot of the PCOS symptoms. And the reason that is because it's insulin resistance that is causing a lot of the imbalance. Every every PCOS situation is so much different that it's really difficult to just kind of do a one size fits all thing and expect it to work for everybody. But unfortunately, that's kind of what doctors do. So, when I first got diagnosed with PCOS, they wanted to put me on metformin. Most people are really familiar with this drug. It's a pre-diabetic drug. It's basically supposed to regulate your blood sugar and your insulin levels. Um, what it did to me was pretty dramatic. I don't think that this happens to a lot of people. But I took my first pill and it just made me really nauseous at first. And I was like, I'll be okay. I've heard that this is a symptom. And so I dealt with it. Um, but then in the afternoon, when I took my second pill, because I was on 500 milligrams twice a day, and so I took my second pill at night. I think it was probably about 7 o'clock, and it wasn't even an hour went by, and all of a sudden, it felt like all of the energy got sucked out of me. It was really weird. So I was lying on the couch, and all of a sudden, I realized I couldn't move. I could hardly lift my head. I could hardly move my arms. Talking was a challenge for me. I was just extremely lethargic. And I felt really nauseous and really sick and lightheaded, just weird, just like I've never felt before in my life. So, of course, I kind of said something to my husband. I was like, I don't feel right. I don't understand what's going on. And he looked at me and he goes, you don't look good. It's like you're pale. You look like you're going to pass out, and whatever the case may be. So we ended up going to the hospital. Um, I think he had to carry me if I remember correctly. I don't really remember a lot of it. That's how out of it I was. And they brought me into the hospital. Basically, what it had done is dropped my blood sugar levels really low, which it's not supposed to do. It's supposed to be a regulator. So, like I said, it really hit me a lot more dramatic than I think it does most people. But with us thin sisters, that don't necessarily have insulin resistance issues or were bordering insulin resistance issues, it makes it difficult to take a drug that is that strong. As metformin definitely kicks blood sugar issues in the butt, and it's really good for a lot of people with PCOS. But unfortunately, those of us that don't necessarily have that insulin problem, it can make us really sick. And so, what kind of brought me to this video today is that I spoke to another woman yesterday. About her situation, and she too has PCOS but is thin. And they put her on metformin. She's like, I've been really sick for a while and I don't really know what to do about it. So instantaneously, I recommended switching the metformin for myo-inositol. Um, a lot of people have heard about that, but it's very similar to metformin in its effects, but it's not quite so harsh. So it's a lot more natural, and of course, you can tailor your dose to whatever it is that you need personally. Um, I take it in a powder form. There are capsules, but basically what it does is it just regulates your blood sugar, and the side effects are similar to metformin. If you take too much, it can make you nauseous. It can make your bowel movements a little loose, that kind of thing. So I started out at a really small dose. I think it was an eighth of a teaspoon a day, just to kind of see how it affected me. And my first few doses, I did notice I was slightly lightheaded and that my stomach felt kind of funny. But I pushed past that because I knew that it was changing the way that my body digested things. So it was kind of normal to have some sort of a side effect right off the bat. But so I continued taking an eighth of a teaspoon a day, which is just, I think it's half the recommended dose on my container, but it's actually, I think, a quarter of the recommended dose for somebody with PCOS. So started out with that. I think I did that for about 2 weeks till my body got used to it, and then I upped to a quarter dose or a quarter teaspoon, which was the recommended dose on the back of my container. And I've been doing that for a while, and it's really changed kind of how I felt. I had a lot of digestive issues before that. I would get constipated really easily. I always had this like heavy rock feeling in my stomach, my lower stomach, like I could push down, and it just felt like there was something always there. And that probably has a lot to do with the constipation, but I also think it had to do with inflammation. So, anyways, so that myo-inositol is really beneficial for insulin resistance when it's a mild problem. When it's technically still in normal range, but on, on one spectrum, like the low end or the high end, or if you're slightly out of the normal range. So, and I was on the low end of the normal range, I believe is what it was. So, anyways, so yeah, myo-inositol is really good. That's kind of what I wanted to start off with here. Another thing that the woman and I spoke about the other day that also is a thin sister is her adrenal health. And it's kind of funny. Your endocrine system is a whole, and all doctors look at it in pieces. They go, okay, well, you have PCOS, which means that we need to regulate your hormones, right? Well, they don't really think about why it's unregulated. Why is this not normal? What is affecting it to make it be this way? So they just give you Clomid or metformin to take care of the symptomatic problems, and which can work in a lot of cases for a lot of women to get pregnant. But then after you stop those drugs, your body goes back to the way that it was before. So our goal here is to correct the problem, not just put a band-aid on it. So basically, starting with the inositol was a really good step for me, replacing that for metformin. I've been on that for probably 3 years now. It's made a pretty big difference in my lifestyle. Of course, I've made a lot of other changes, but to start kind of from the beginning, when I first started researching this, I looked a lot into the testosterone imbalance because my testosterone was pretty elevated, and I did get some chin hairs, and I got the hormonal acne, and just abnormal hair growth in general, which is really inconvenient, especially as a woman. It kind of makes you feel like you're less of a woman. And just to clarify, it does not make you less of a woman. It's just something that we have to battle. So what I did for my elevated testosterone is I took saw palmetto, and I had a really good experience with this, which, mind you, make sure you have a healthy liver before you start taking this, because it can be hard on your liver depending on how you are. I mean, most people our age don't generally have issues with their liver, but if you do, don't take it. So anyway, I started with the full recommended dose of that because my testosterone levels were a little bit above 80. They say that they're supposed to be between 15 and 70, but the ideal area would be under 40. So I'm like, okay, how do I get under 40, without taking all these medications? Because they were trying to prescribe me spirulin lactone. Sorry, I can't say that one. But basically, it's a pharmaceutical that's supposed to lower your testosterone levels, help with that abnormal hair growth, help with your hair loss on your head, which I get right at the... Here, let's see if I can do this and still hold the button. Right here, I get some hair loss right underneath the side. I don't know if you can see it, but I get that on the sides there, and I have really thick hair, so me losing hair is kind of dramatic. You can notice it a lot more on thick hair when you have a bald spot. But anyway, so they wanted to prescribe me the spirulin lactone, and I didn't want to add any more pharmaceuticals to my regimen. So that's when I found saw palmetto, which is technically recommended for prostate health in men. It can help prevent prostate cancer, but that doesn't mean that we can't take it. Basically, I found out that it eliminates something that's called a 5-alpha reductase. It's a hormone, sort of speak, in your body that converts estrogen to testosterone. So in women, we typically convert it to estrogen, not the other way around. But our body is out of balance and kind of in shock. So it tends to do things to try and protect other parts of your body. So it goes, oh, you have too much estrogen. Let's make it into testosterone, because estrogen dominance is actually what the issue is when it comes to PCOS. And that's the same problems with a lot of reproductive issues, because we have so many external estrogens that we are exposed to every day. And it just overwhelms your body. So there's actually two different kinds of estrogens. And we'll just say it like this: there's good estrogen, there's bad estrogen. Bad estrogen is like from your plastics, from pesticides, inorganic materials, the estrogens you absorb through meat that have hormones in it, because those farmers, they pump their cows full of hormones to keep them producing milk all year, or they pump their chickens full of hormones to keep them producing eggs as long as they can. And so, in turn, when we consume those animal products, we are consuming the hormones, and it's kind of what sets us out of balance. But so there's a lot of things that you're exposed to that have those estrogens. Anyway, so your body's trying to lower the estrogen levels, and so in order to do that, it just converts it into testosterone. It's kind of like a weird thing. So anyway, saw palmetto lowers your 5-alpha reductase response. So in turn, it lowers your testosterone. So again, I said that when I started the saw palmetto, I was above 80, and I went back in a month later, I was down to 42. So I think right there is pretty substantial proof at how well it actually works. And I was floored, to be honest with you, because I have always heard that herbs can take a long time to really adjust your body to the way that it needed to be. So I mean, I don't take that as consistently as I used to, just because after taking it and kind of getting my body regulated on other levels, I haven't had as bad of a testosterone issue. I haven't had a chin hair in probably over 6 months, which is amazing. And so anyway, so the saw palmetto was a really good start for me to get my testosterone under control right off the bat. And then I managed it, of course, with diet. Everybody says diet and exercise, diet and exercise. And they kind of go by fad diets and exercises. They try and push you towards, the gluten-free or the sugar-free or the ketogenic or the paleo, blah, blah, blah. I'm not about fads. I still eat gluten. I still eat cheese. I still eat sugar. But the truth is it's all about moderation. People don't understand that anything in excess is bad for you. Anything. It doesn't matter what it could be the best thing in the world. You eat too much of it, it's gonna make you sick. So with that being said, you can have gluten just in moderation. You can have sugar in moderation. You can have dairy in moderation. So, I mean, like for me, I probably only consume roughly 2 to 4 ounces of dairy product a day. That includes any cheeses, sour creams, milks, anything like that. And I've noticed that has made the biggest difference in me. And everybody's going to be different. So you kind of got to find what it is that makes the difference for you. So after I cut back on my dairy, I noticed my digestive system started to regulate even more so, which was amazing. I've had digestive issues since as long as I can remember. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I used to call in from the clinic all the time, have my mom come in and come pick me up, and she always thought I was faking it, but I really wasn't. They ended up taking me into the doctors and doing a ultrasound on my stomach, and I was quite literally full of poop. But it's just been kind of an ongoing problem with me. So finding ways to regulate it was a really big deal. And I didn't know that PCOS is directly related to your digestive system. It has a really big impact. And that kind of circles back around to your endocrine system, your adrenal glands, your pituitary glands, your thyroid. All of that's connected. And if one of them is out of balance, it's gonna put stress on the rest of the system and cause it to malfunction and act weird. So for me, my adrenal health is probably the biggest problem. I have really bad anxiety issues, and anxiety is caused by your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands produce adrenaline, cortisol, progesterone, all of that. So, if you have progesterone in your body and your adrenal glands are producing it properly, you're going to be a relatively calm person. Your hormones are going to be regulated. You're going to sleep well at night, everything like that. Now, if your cortisol levels are elevated or your adrenaline levels are elevated, you're going to have mood swings. You're going to have anxiety, insomnia, depression, possibly even bipolar disorder. All of these things are caused because adrenaline. It's like, say your body's on a constant defense mode, right? It's going to be constantly producing cortisol and adrenaline because it's trying to fight those stresses in your life. So the minute you get slightly upset, it produces a surge of these hormones and it basically shocks your system. And then you're like, holy crap, I'm angry and I'm punching things or screaming and acting irrationally. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're fine again. Or you're in tears. And it's just such dramatic switches that it's really hard to deal with. And if you go to a doctor and you tell them I'm depressed, what's the first thing that they do? They want to put you on Xanax or something, some kind of antidepressant. They don't go, what is the problem? What is the problem actually? Why is this happening? It's because of your adrenal health. And so when I figured that out, I started taking a product called Adrenal Support Formula. It's by Gaia, so that's GAIA. And these pills, they look like black tar in a capsule, but they have a lot of balancing agents in them, like ashwagandha, which, if you know anything about herbs, that's a pretty popular one that's used. It's typically used for focus, kind of just... Sorry, it cut me off. So, yeah, it's got ashwagandha in it, which is a balancing agent. And what I really liked about this specific product is that it didn't have licorice root in it. A lot of adrenal support formulas have licorice root because it does support your adrenal glands, most definitely. But it also can increase your blood sugar, or not blood sugar, but blood pressure. So if you have blood pressure issues and you start taking licorice root, it's going to make them a lot worse. So, if you have low blood pressure, licorice root's great for you. It helps balance that. But, so anyway, I started taking that, and the first day I noticed that my stress response was dramatically different. So I was at work, and I have a relatively stressful job. I hire subcontractors to build homes, and so in that, I can deal with a lot of stressful situations, especially as being a woman in a man's industry. People tend to put a lot more pressure on me. But so dealing with those stresses is really difficult for me sometimes, and I try not to act irrationally, and it's a constant battle between the logic side in my head and the irrational side that just wants to scream at everybody. And then, without this adrenal support formula, going grocery shopping was a task for me because there's so many people. I would get an anxiety attack and I'd get so stressed out by the end of the shopping trip. I would just be ready to scream and rip everyone's head off. And then, of course, I come home and my husband gets the brunt of it. So, anyway, so the first day I started taking it, I noticed that I wasn't really overreacting to stressful situations at work. I felt a lot more level-headed. I felt like my focus was better, all of that. It was great. So I took it for a couple of weeks, and then I remember I missed a day. I think it was actually a few days because I wouldn't have noticed it the first day, obviously, because it stays in your system for a little while. But so I think I had missed like 2 or 3 days of it. I don't know if I was out or what. But it was weird. I was like, God, I'm just so emotional today. I felt like an absolute wreck. And I got home and I was crying and I was mad and I was stressed out and all this stuff. And my husband looks at me and goes, did you take your adrenal support? And I was like, no, I didn't, and so I started taking it again, and I was back to dealing with it a lot better. But anyway, so, aside from just your emotional side of things, your adrenal glands do a lot more. So, like I said, they produce the cortisol and your progesterone. Well, if it's spending all its time making cortisol, what does that do? It depletes your body of progesterone. And when your body is depleted of progesterone and you have an estrogen dominance issue, then it kind of gets worse because you're supposed to have a good progesterone to estrogen ratio. But if your body is depleted of progesterone, obviously that ratio is going to be out of balance. So an example of progesterone, like where it's supposed to be at, those of you that have been run through all the tests, you know this, but there's a test, it's done on cycle day 21. It's for your progesterone. So it's either done on the 21st day of your cycle or 7 days after ovulation. It just kind of depends on the doctor. But, so anyway, I went in for a 21 day. Your levels are supposed to be above 10. Okay, you'd think 10, that's not a very high number. I should be able to do that, right? That's what I thought, anyways, in the beginning of all this. So they took me in, I did the blood test, and I got my results back the next day. They were at 0.2. Yeah, that was really, really bad. I was really, really upset. I kind of thought it was the end all, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So my doctor wanted to put me on progesterone, and I'm like, well, I know that my body produces that, so I'll give it a shot. So I took their progesterone. I think it was Provera. It was during the last 2 weeks of my cycle every month, and I did start achieving a regular period, which was fine. But, I kind of realized that it wasn't fixing it. It was just putting a Band-Aid on it. It was just making it okay for now. And that was also when I had started the Clomid. So I was on the Clomid for 4 months. At that time it was 4 months, and with the progesterone in conjunction. They didn't do ultrasound monitoring. They just did the blood test on the 21st day of my cycle to see if my progesterone was the right level, which of course it would be because I was on progesterone supplements. But anyway, so, they put me on the Clomid, and I hated it. I had hot flashes, mood swings, even those adrenal support pills were not correcting my mood swings. It was really, really bad. And I started lactating. That was really weird for me, which, for those of you that don't know, lactating is producing breast milk. But, so that right there tells me, okay, my adrenal glands, my pituitary glands, all that are so out of whack. Then my pituitary glands all of a sudden go, oh, you need this hormone called prolactin, so we're just going to give you a bunch of it because of this pill you're taking. And then every time you hear a baby cry, you're going to leak breast milk everywhere. So that's kind of what I had to deal with. And of course, I call my doctor and I'm freaking out because I'm producing breast milk. And she goes, is there blood in it? I was like, what? That can happen? Oh God, and no, there's not. She goes, oh, then it's fine. I was like, that can't be fine. I don't know how that would be fine. That seems like a hormonal issue. How is this product being effective if it's setting things even more out of balance? Well, anyway, so 4 months went by. Of course, nothing happened. And so I was like, screw these pharmaceuticals. I don't want to lactate anymore. I don't want any more hot flashes. I don't want to deal with this. So I dug so deep into herbs that I can't even tell you. It's like a lot of people go, okay, well, why don't you try soy isoflavones? I heard of that a few times, that they're like, oh, it's like the natural form of Clomid. And it's not. Clomid blocks your estrogen receptors in your brain, so it makes your body think you're not producing estrogen. So either your body doesn't produce estrogen, or B, it does the opposite. It has this uber estrogen surge, which is what kind of happened to me. But anyway, so that's what Clomid is. But soy is an estrogen. It's a phytoestrogen. So, and what that means is it's basically plant-based estrogen. That's the best way to look at it. So soy increases your estrogen, which does the opposite. So people are taking these, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. I don't know how I feel about that. And so I didn't do it. I just kind of watched and listened to other people doing it to get their experiences. And the success rates were not as high as some people had claimed. But that's when I found black cohosh. And black cohosh is more typically known for women going through menopause because it helps regulate your estrogen metabolism. So the estrogen that you do have, it uses properly. And it also decreases hot flashes and stuff, which I get on a regular basis, which is weird because I have estrogen dominance, but it turns into testosterone. Anyway, um, but so I get hot flashes on my own, even not on medications. So I was like, ooh, some way to get rid of it sounds really nice. And then I dug more and I found a clinical study on the National Library of Medicine's website. And what they had done is combined Clomid with black cohosh to see how it affected it. Because Clomid thins the uterine lining and black cohosh actually thickens it. So they did this test. I think it was 40 milligrams of Clomid from cycle day 1 to cycle day 12, and 50 or 100 milligrams of of Clomid from cycle day 5 through 9. So, and they had a control group with just the Clomid, and then of course the variable group adding the black cohosh, and it proved to be significantly higher success rates when combining the black cohosh because it thickens your uterine lining, kind of creates a nice little home for that egg. And then also what black cohosh does is it balances your FSH and your LH. So LH is that luteinizing hormone that ovulation tests test for. And with PCOS, you get kind of one of two situations. Either you pretty much always get positive ovulation tests or you never get a positive. You always have like a pretty high amount of LH, but not high enough to have a surge, and it just kind of stays there. But anyway, and then FSH is your follicle stimulating hormone. This is what causes your body to select an egg on your ovary, because you're at the start of the month, you produce, 15, or at least you're supposed to. Us PCOSers produce like 40 on each ovary. So it stimulates all these follicles, but then your body has to pick one or two that are healthy, and it has to focus on growing those. But on a typical basis, our LH to FSH ratio is imbalanced, so your LH is going to be really high. And that kind of just prevents your body's ability to produce the FSH, pick an egg, and cause it to ovulate. So that's why we have those anovulatory cycles. So anyway, I found out that this helps regulate it, and I started taking it. I, of course, was not combining it with the Clomid at the time because I was kind of tired of all of that, but I figured, if it works with Clomid, it might work without. And so I took it for 12 days, cycle day 1 through 12. I took more than the recommended dose. I think I took 180 milligrams to start because I couldn't find the little 40 milligram pills. So, and they were herbal capsules, so you can't really cut those in half or anything. But so I took that, and I got my very first in my life positive ovulation test. Let's just say I cried. I was so unbelievably happy. And so, when it comes to you that don't ovulate, that's going to be my first herbal recommendation is the black cohosh. If you don't want to go in and try the medications yet, try black cohosh. Trust me, it works. Now, no, I did not get pregnant, but let me tell you why. I don't just have PCOS. I also have endometriosis, and I also have a chronic inflammatory response in my ovaries that's known as luteinized unruptured follicle syndrome. So what that means is that even if I do produce an egg, it doesn't release from my ovary. It just hangs out and festers and then turns into a cyst that can or may not go away when I start my period. But anyway, so I just incorporated the black cohosh to start, and then some B vitamins, a B complex, some vitamin E, zinc, selenium, just your average stuff that you could probably find in a multivitamin. So I started that, and like I said, I got my first ovulation test. I was really happy. So of course, we're like, oh, let's go, do our thing so we can try and catch the egg. And I noticed that I was showing other ovulatory signs like the cervical mucus that nobody really likes to talk about that you're supposed to have that I had never had before. And so time went on, and I wasn't taking anything else. There was, the saw palmetto, but I wasn't taking any progesterone supplements or anything like that. And sure enough, 14 days after my positive ovulation test, I started my period. That doesn't happen for me. I normally don't get a period very often, if at all. And so anyway, I did that for a while. I think I gave it 6 or 8 months, and it just wasn't, I wasn't getting pregnant because of the luteinized unruptured follicle syndrome that I didn't know about yet. And so, we had moved at the time. We started seeing a new reproductive endocrinologist up here, and so I got started on Clomid again, and I was like, hey, I'm going to combine the black cohosh, but I gave it one cycle without to kind of compare the difference. So the first cycle, I didn't really have much of a uterine lining, and I only produced one follicle at 18 millimeters, which is like the bare minimum for mature. And it took a long time. I think I ovulated on like cycle day 20 or 22 or something like that. And my lining was barely at an 8, which is the minimum that my doctor requires. So the second month I combined in the black cohosh, and I did 120 milligrams. And I can tell you, I ovulated on cycle day 13. I had 2 beautiful follicles, one at 20 and one at 21, which they're supposed to be between 18 and 24, so I was about dead center, which I think is pretty perfect. And my uterine lining was at 12 millimeters, and it's supposed to be between 8 millimeters and 14. So anyway, 12 millimeters, I was like, yeah, that's really good. And I was super happy, super excited, but that's when I got diagnosed with LUFS. I found out because I had gotten the luteinized unruptured follicle problem, so those eggs didn't release and they started festering. Well, they had ended up turning hemorrhagic and growing really large. So, and I had mentioned that in my other video. So, but anyway, so with that being said, after that was when I made a lot of my diet changes. So like I said, I cut way back on dairy, and as far as gluten goes, I don't eat pasta hardly at all anymore. It's hard. Pasta is my favorite food. And so I don't really use that at all. I don't eat bread. I don't eat donuts. I don't eat bagels. I don't eat anything like that. I mean, occasionally I'll have some pizza or whatever, but I really, really don't include it in my diet nearly as much as I used to. And so I've been doing that for, a year now, I think. And I can tell you honestly, I feel so much better. I don't break out hardly at all anymore. And when I do break out, it's because of those days that I've cheated and eaten a piece of pizza. And my stomach feels better. I feel lighter. I don't have this like heavy, full feeling in my stomach all the time. Even though I do have a little bit of excess weight, probably like 10 pounds, I feel like it isn't really there as much, if that makes sense. Like my stomach underneath the chunkiness is a lot firmer, a lot more solid. I just feel better. I have more energy. I don't really require coffee as much in the morning because I have more energy. It's kind of nice. And so I did that, and then, I looked into people starting the paleo diet because of PCOS, and I was like, well, that makes sense because you're going to everything in its natural form. So I started incorporating that as much as I was able into my diet. But again, I didn't cut out everything completely. Like I said, I still eat some cheese, I still eat some gluten. It's just a lot less. And then, I figured I have all these insulin resistance issues, so I started working on my sugar intake, which wasn't really high to begin with. I don't really care for sweets all that much, but I did have problems that I would eat a lot of, like soda. I loved soda. It was probably one of my favorite things. And so I cut soda out. I stopped drinking white chocolate hazelnut Americanos, and I started drinking Americanos with just 3 raw sugars in them. And I don't really make any pastries or cookies or muffins anymore at home like I used to, and everything like that. So changing that and just kind of trying to eat more vegetables. So for lunch, instead of eating a sandwich or something, I started eating sliced up cucumber, sliced up peppers, half an avocado, a few, like an orange or something. So it just kind of, I started to graze more than I wanted meals and carbs and stuff. So that's really changed my life a lot, and I really recommend trying to make some changes to your diet, even if it's little things. Like I started with breakfast. I was like, okay, I'll do 1 meal at a time. And I started with breakfast and just kind of moved my way on through the day until everything was changed. Dinner was the hardest because I have to cook for my husband too, and he loves all those carbs and fats. Like his favorite thing that I've ever made is my stuffed macaroni and cheese, but that is loaded with dairy and gluten. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. But anyway, so that's kind of that. There's some other things that are really tied in to all of this. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've already recorded a 35-minute video, so I could talk for days about it. But I really hope that this stimulates some questions. I really want to help you guys. I don't want you to have to go through this alone. I went through it alone, and it was scary, and it was hard, and it took so much learning and everything. And for that woman that I spoke to the other day, she sent me her blood work, and I went through all of her blood work results with her and explained everything, because I know that her doctor doesn't. I know her doctor just goes, oh, we're going to run some blood work, and so let's pull a full panel, and they do, and they go, oh, you're in the normal range. Turns out she was not in the normal range. She was borderline anemic, which is really bad when you're trying to get pregnant. She actually tested negative for the rubella virus, which means that if she were to get the rubella virus during her first stages of the pregnancy, she would probably lose the baby, or it would be a stillborn. So, it's just things like that. You'd think your doctor would say something, not to mention she was hyperthyroid. Like, you have a hyperthyroid. Dang thing cut me off again. So yeah, you have a hyperthyroid and your doctor doesn't say anything. I know that it was barely hyper, but still, you should, as a doctor, I think it's your responsibility to say something. But anyway, so, I broke down everything for her so she fully understood. I made some diet recommendations so that she could get on top of those issues naturally without having to take the medications. She was extremely thankful, and that to me is enough gratification. It's been 5 years on this journey, going on 6, and I don't know. It's the only thing that makes it worth it. Is to be able to help everybody and to share the knowledge that I have learned over the last few years. So anyway, again, I hope that you guys find this interesting at bare minimum, and submit all of your questions, any of your questions. I don't care how personal or impersonal it may be, if it's about me or if it's about you, just go ahead and ask, all right? Thanks. I hope to hear from you guys soon.